So this video covers 5 things I learned from pricing in running my own business. Hi, hello, this is Liz and you're on the Ostara Studio YouTube channel. As an entrepreneur and a business owner, I get how important pricing can be and how difficult it can be to really figure out what your pricing is and how to really stand strong in your pricing. So in today's video, I wanted to share my experience, the lessons I've learned when it comes to pricing your business and pricing your services. Lesson number 1, calculate the cost of doing business and then work out your pricing based on the cost of doing business. So what is cost of doing business? Cost of doing business is really to see what the costs are of running your business. This is when you work out what all the expenses are that you pay on a monthly basis, and you work out all the costs that are involved in operating the business. This even includes things like calculating what the cost of an asset is to your business, but I'll get into that just now. So the purpose of working out the cost of your business when you're calculating your pricing is to work out your expenses and then to work out a profitable amount of your hourly rate, essentially. So how do you do that? You calculate all your expenses per month. These would be things like your fuel costs per month, how much you're paying each month to travel around, whether it is traveling to clients, whether it's traveling in general for the business, picking up stock, things like that. You'd be looking at things like your business expenses, the cost of software, the cost of printing. There's all those types of things. It can be a long list. Depending on what type of business you operate, there will always be expenses. It's not just the rent of your office space necessarily. It can get quite detailed when you actually review that. The assets that you have in your business are assets that you use to work on your business. If you're a photographer, that might be the cost of your camera. Most people would have the cost of assets related to either their vehicles, their computers, things like that. Now, why you want to work out the monthly cost, these are not things you necessarily pay for monthly, but you want to work out the monthly cost to the business because that asset will degrade and will need to be replaced over time. So in working out the monthly amount, you're essentially working out from the future backwards. You're thinking, okay, in the future, I would need to replace this camera in 3 years' time, or this laptop in 2 years' time, or this phone in 2 years' time, my car in 5 years' time, that type of thing. Then you go, okay, the overall cost of it is this, and you're going to divide it by the months to get to the monthly cost to the business. So if a camera costs you 36,000 Rand or $36,000, you would essentially be looking at the cost per month over it's going to be needed to replace in 3 years, so 36 months. So the cost to my business is 1,000 Rand per month. Obviously, this doesn't consider things like insurance. Your insurance for this would also be considered, but that's how you get your assets cost to the business. Remember to think of it in terms of its future value, because right now your camera might be costing 36,000 Rand, but in the future it might cost 54,000 Rand. So always work on what the replacement value of it essentially would be when you're looking at that monthly cost. What you do then is when you've got these expenses and costs worked out, you then say, okay, well, I want to work this amount of time in the month. I want to work these amounts of hours. And then you go and divide all those costs by the hours you want to work to get to your hourly rate. Now, remember to also consider adding profit to that, because your business needs to be profitable. You will not always be able to forecast all the costs, for instance, involved. So a business needs to be profitable in its nature. You're not doing this to just cover the cost of doing business. So consider working in your hourly rate, your profit on top of that. And also things like inflation. You need to work for the lifestyle you want in a few years' time, not the lifestyle that's maintained now. And that's essentially what I mean when I say I learned to calculate the costs of my business. I learned what I need to do in terms of hourly amounts to cover that. Now, if I want to work more hours, I can bring my rate lower, but I am in my own business so that I can live the life I want. And that's how I've worked out that rate. I've not looked at competitors to necessarily work out my hourly rates when we're looking at it from an hourly rate perspective and not a project perspective, because their lifestyles and what they've worked out on their costs of their business might be very different from mine. So competitors can be a consideration, but the main consideration should be, what are the costs of my business? What are my profit margins? How many hours I do want to work? The second lesson I've learned, setting targets for myself. Now, I do set targets for myself in terms of how many hours I need to work in order to cover the costs of my business, essentially. And I know it can be stressful to set targets for yourself, because if you don't reach those targets, it can be quite stressful. But I am gentle with myself with regards to that. My profit margins allow me not to reach every single target every month. That being said, it gives me a little bit of a motivation to work towards something. So when I'm talking about targets, I'm specifically looking from my perspective at how many discovery calls do I need to book a month to get to a certain project, a certain number of projects or work done each month to reach my goals. So I know, for instance, that I've got a very good conversion rate on my discovery calls. I know that 4 out of 5 people continue to go ahead with me with work. So I've got a 4 out of 5 conversion rate, essentially, percentage-wise. I'm not even, that's like 80% conversion rate. So from that type of conversion rate, I then know I need to work out my funnels to get to those 4 people that I know I need. So I know I need 5 people, not 4, because I don't convert 100%. But 4 is the amount I'm actually looking for. So then I work it into my marketing. So some of it goes to social media, but not a lot, because social media, I don't necessarily get a lot of leads unless it's paid campaigns that I'm running, but I still do that. Then a lot of it also comes from places like my public speaking that I do. So every month I have a certain number of public speaking type of things, like webinars or from other platforms that bring me in. And I know that I get roughly a certain number of people contacting me after a webinar like that, if I know that the webinar has a set number of people. Then I also do upselling to current clients, or I do follow-ups with older clients, and that's how I get the discovery calls that I do each month. And that's the target I work towards. So I don't focus on the amount of money necessarily as the target. I focus on the number of people. And that's just how I am. I like to work on the people amount. Then you're not fixated on the money. You're fixated on the impact you can make. The third lesson I've learned is that I need to relook pricing quite regularly, and I need to be looking at it flexibly, because things change. What's relevant now is not going to necessarily be relevant in the next 5 months, next year, next 3 years. So I do relook my pricing module at least once a year. And that's when I do my yearly updates and for my clients, that type of thing. Some of my clients are still on older modules of pricing, and that's okay because they started with me at a specific pricing level. But when I'm making updates to my pricing, and I'm not talking about your yearly increasing, but if you're drastically changing packages to clients, then I do that with the newer clients, not the older clients. But relooking that helps me to consider things like inflation, lifestyle changes, unexpected events, like what's happened in the last two years. So those are things I relook at, and I'd relook at it flexibly and decide, okay, well, yeah, there needs to be a change. There needs to be a change. Okay, this year I did a lot of upskilling. I did a lot of courses to make sure my services are of a better quality. So this year I need to consider that. So it's not just inflation. I look at things like my experience and looking at the skills I've learned in the last year to make sure that is implemented in my pricing. So as part of tip 1, I just also want to make sure that when you purchase a course, include that in your expenses, because any course you take that helps you in your business is an expense, and it's something you should be considering in your pricing model. Lesson number 4 is the psychology of pricing. Now, I was on a challenge with a woman that does amazing work when it comes to the psychology of pricing, and she owns a Girl Boss Hustle, and she has this online program around the psychology of pricing that I highly recommend, and you can go and look in my description box I'll try and link to that specifically for you. But just a quick, what I actually learned about the psychology of pricing, because this has been a long time coming, is the psychology of pricing for me, is to understand how people think about pricing and how they think about pricing, how that informs their purchasing habits, essentially. Because we actually have very conditioned ways of thinking about money, and there's a psychology around pricing specifically. Just to give you one example, and I learned this many years ago, and this is something that I work with quoting and sending out proposals all the time, and it really works for me, is the offering 3 packages, or 3 quotes in a way, so 3 options for a client to choose from. So having the most affordable, your mid-level, and then your expensive, your highest premium level type of package. And the psychology behind that is that people tend to go for the middle one. So the majority of people will go for the mid package, not the most affordable package and not the most expensive package. So you will get outliers. There's some people who will be price shoppers or on a strict budget that will go for the entry level because that's what they can afford. Then you'll get the people who really care about all the bells and whistles and everything the most expensive package has to offer, and they'll go for the most expensive package. But the majority of people will go for that mid-level. That's just the psychology. When there are 3 options, they'll go for the mid-level option. And that's something I use, and I swear by it because it has worked for me for many, many years. And the idea of that is essentially, for me personally, is that I know that everything my clients want and need is in that mid package. So I deliberately guide them to that mid package by, for instance, having everything they want in that middle package, but the most expensive package after that will have a lot more extras that aren't necessarily necessities, but they're nice to haves. And the most affordable package, obviously it being affordable, will just cover the basics. So I'm guiding them to where they want, to the mid-level in the easy way. And with that, you really need to know what your clients want to be able to understand what is placed in that mid package. So that's just one aspect of the psychology of pricing. So I highly encourage you to become more schooled at the psychology of pricing, because it can really kind of spark ideas about pricing for you. The 5th lesson I've learned, and I'm almost leaving the most difficult one for last, is to look constantly and just consider and reflect on my own psychology and relationship to money in my business. Specifically looking at that feeling of not always feeling good enough or not worthy enough, and also then what that means in relation to not charging enough. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and just a lot of people in general in their careers, or in general, people have this feeling of not feeling good enough. We call it the good enough, not good enough trauma, or not good enough, lots of times it will be referred to as like the not good enough wound or the not good enough trauma. And essentially, it's important to consider this, because I think, for instance, that a lot of entrepreneurs that enter the market because they need to market undercharge because they think they don't have the experience. And essentially, for me, what I'm picking up when I'm working with clients is that it is nothing to do with whether they're good enough or not. That's just their perception. And then they often get stuck there. So the initial intention is to charge little as they're entering the market, and then every year slowly increasing the pricing. But often what happens after the year, either they never increase, they get stuck there, and they still just continue there because they actually don't feel good enough. It has nothing to do with not charging enough. It's the feeling of not feeling good enough. So they get stuck there. Or what happens is that they realize, but they should actually be charging a lot more. And now to make that leap between undercharging and suddenly needing to charge a lot more, the gap is too big. So to sell that to current clients, or even to sell that to new people, can be quite daunting and difficult. So needing to relook that and asking yourself, but is this not good enough actually real? Is it something that's really representative of my reality? Because I believe that just by existing, we are worthy and we are good enough. And how that plays into pricing, I'll bring up, so Tiffany Markman, she's a copywriter and she also works a lot with freelancers on pricing specifically. And recently she posted on her social media, she posted that for years she taught freelancers not to charge according to time. So don't charge per hour, which I also don't do, even though my cost of doing business is worked out per hour. I don't ever quote per hour. I quote, or I do sometimes, but the majority of times I quote per project, because you're not selling your time. So she says for years, Tiffany Markman taught people that people are not buying your time, because if they're buying your time, then there's always going to be kind of, does that mean that people who are very skilled, who do something in a short period of time, should be charging less to someone who's inexperienced? So she was saying, you don't sell your time, you actually sell your experience. And then she said recently that, well, I actually taught people wrong there, because I realize now it's not actually experience that you're selling effectiveness. And that made like a big aha for me, because if you're entering the market as an entrepreneur, are you really entering any kind of market because it's about effectiveness? Are you still promising effectiveness? So whether you're new to market or not, should that actually make an effect? Should that influence your pricing in any way? Because if you can offer something that's just as effective as someone who's already been around for a year, why are you then undercharging yourself? Or undercharging your services, not yourself. So yes, that to me made just like a big light bulb go up for me, because that is such a beautiful way of putting it, that you essentially, clients are investing in your effectiveness and what you have to offer. So, that last one was a big one. But that was my 5 lessons that I've learned when it came to pricing by running my business, and in running my business, understanding pricing and how I've come to price my services. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed making this video and diving a little bit deeper into pricing. Let me know in the comments, do you resonate with a specific lesson? Is there something that you feel has been an aha moment for you in this lesson? And what's your experience been with pricing your business? Do you have any questions? I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.